When a man starts ignoring you, the first thought that often pops into your head is, what did I do wrong? Why is he pulling away? How do I get his attention back? It's a painful place to be, and almost every woman knows it. But what if I told you his silence isn't necessarily about your flaws? It could reflect his own deep-seated fears and inner conflicts. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, called this phenomenon projection. We unconsciously attribute to others what we're unwilling to acknowledge in ourselves. Behind a man's indifference often lies a whole range of unconscious emotions. Maybe he's afraid of getting emotionally close because he's been hurt before. Perhaps deep down, he feels you're too good for him and creates distance as a defense. And sometimes, plain old selfishness and immaturity are behind the ignoring, an inability to express feelings openly and take responsibility in the relationship. Jung referred to these hidden parts of our personality as the shadow, the aspects we stubbornly refuse to see in ourselves but readily notice in others. What makes this situation particularly painful is the triggering of our ancient attachment mechanisms. When a significant person distances themselves, our brain interprets this, on a biological level, as a threat to our survival. In ancient times, being banished from the tribe meant certain death. Our brains still carry that response. That's why we're prepared to do anything to regain a man's attention. We obsessively analyze his behavior, invent reasons to contact him, and search for hidden meanings in his infrequent messages. It's not weakness. It's an ancient instinct that once helped our ancestors maintain vital social bonds. But here's the paradox. The more desperately we try to win him back, the less valuable we become in his eyes. The male psyche is wired so that genuine desire arises only where there's room to maneuver, where there's an element of mystery and the unspoken. When a woman is always available, always predictable, always ready to forgive bad behavior, she inadvertently devalues herself in her partner's estimation. Not because she isn't good enough, but because it's human nature. We don't value what's always within easy reach and take it for granted. So, what can you do in this situation? First, stop feeding his ego with your anxieties. Every time you check to see if he's read your message or rack your brains trying to figure out why he's acting this way, you're giving him a piece of your life energy. The second crucial step is to create that room to maneuver. Don't block him out in a fit of pique. Don't make a scene. Simply disappear from his emotional radar. Stop being available, predictable, and easy to figure out. Let his psyche, accustomed to your constant presence, finally feel the discomfort of your absence. Most importantly, redirect all that unused emotional energy back to yourself. Finally start doing the things you've been putting off. Sign up for those classes you've been dreaming about. Get a new hairstyle. Start exercising again. And surround yourself with people who value you here and now. When you cease to be the mirror in which he's used to seeing his own superiority, something amazing happens. He suddenly begins to see you as a multifaceted individual, not as an object that's always on hand, but as a puzzle he wants to solve. Jung said that only by confronting our own shadow can we truly change. His ignoring you isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new dynamic in the relationship, but only if you're willing to let go of old patterns of behavior. When you step out of this exhausting game, you're not losing. You're creating space for a completely different kind of relationship, where you don't have to beg for attention or prove your worth. Where you're loved not for your willingness to put up with bad treatment, but for the light you radiate when you finally allow yourself to be free. This transition is rarely easy. You'll have to confront the fear of being alone, the agonizing desire to go back to the way things were, and the overwhelming temptation to text him first. But it's precisely at these moments that it's crucial to remember. If a person truly values you, they'll find a way to stay in your life. And if they don't, do you really need a relationship where you constantly have to prove your right to love and attention? True feminine strength isn't about making him notice you. It's about having the ability to decide for yourself. Is he worthy of a place in your life? When you stop being afraid of losing someone who doesn't truly appreciate you, you unexpectedly open the door to people who will love you unconditionally, without games of silence, without the need to constantly prove your significance. And then his ignoring you, which seems like a disaster today, will turn out to be the best gift of fate, the opportunity to find your true self and meet the love you truly deserve. When you vanish from the life of a man who's used to ignoring you, an amazing psychological metamorphosis takes place. On the first day, he might not even notice your absence, so confident is he in your constant availability. But gradually, like water wearing away stone, your silence starts to erode his confidence. Carl Jung called this the phenomenon of compensation. The psyche always strives for balance, and when the accustomed attention disappears, a void forms in his soul that he can't ignore. Men who use ignoring as a means of control are deeply dependent on your reaction. Their self-esteem is built on your attempts to win back their attention. But when you stop playing by these rules, their entire strategy crumbles. Instead of the despair or anger they expected, they're confronted with something entirely unexpected, your indifference, and this knocks the ground out from under them. Suddenly, the levers of control that seemed so reliable no longer work. You no longer run after him. You don't text first. You don't seek out encounters. You simply disappear, leaving behind only silence. This vacuum begins to affect the male psyche in surprising ways. At first, he might convince himself that it's even better this way, fewer distractions. But gradually his brain, deprived of its accustomed interaction pattern, starts sending out alarm signals. Jung called this the return of the repressed. The very emotions he's been trying to suppress start surfacing with doubled force. He checks your social media, accidentally brings you up in conversations with mutual friends, and finds silly excuses to contact you. This isn't a conscious strategy. It's his psyche trying to restore the disrupted balance. But the most interesting part begins when he realizes that you've truly ceased to be a part of his life. Not as a demonstration, not as manipulation, but as a conscious choice. At that moment, his main illusion crumbles, that he has power over you. Men who are used to ignoring often don't even realize how much their self-esteem depends on your attention. They feel strong only when they see your weakness. But when you deny them that opportunity, they're confronted with an unpleasant truth. Without your reaction, their strength turns out to be a fiction. Your absence becomes a mirror in which he finally sees his true self. And this can be a turning point. Either he acknowledges his mistakes and tries to change something, or he runs away completely, unable to endure the confrontation with reality. But in either case, you've already won, because you've stopped wasting your energy on someone who doesn't appreciate your presence. As Jung said, meeting oneself is the most frightening of meetings. Your disappearance gives him a chance at such a meeting, but it's his choice whether or not to seize it. The main thing is, your disappearance has to be real. Not a theatrical exit for spite, not a manipulative pause, but a sincere shifting of attention to your own life. When you fill your days with meaning, grow, and surround yourself with interesting people, your absence becomes especially noticeable. He sees that you haven't just gotten offended and retreated into a corner, but that you're truly moving on. And that frightens him the most, the realization that you can be happy without him. Jung wrote that only by losing something do we truly understand its value. Your disappearance is not revenge, but a gift, an opportunity for him to realize that you weren't who he thought you were, that your love wasn't his property, that your presence in his life wasn't an obligation, but a choice, and that now that choice might be different. But the most wonderful thing about this situation isn't even how it affects him, but how it changes you. When you stop clinging to someone who's ignoring you, you create space for something new, for a relationship where there's no room for such games, where you'll be valued not for your patience or compliance, but for the joy and light you bring. And then it will turn out that your disappearance wasn't the end, but the beginning of something much more important. When you suddenly realize that he was never the center of your universe, the source of your happiness, an amazing transformation occurs. This understanding doesn't come as a sudden revelation, but as a gradually dissipating fog. First, you notice that you can laugh without checking his reaction. Then, you discover that your thoughts no longer revolve around his actions. And finally, there comes a moment when you catch yourself simply living your life, not looking back for his approval. Carl Jung called this process individuation, becoming a complete individual who draws strength from within, not from external validation. When you stop seeking a replacement for him and instead expand the boundaries of your world, find new hobbies, deepen old friendships, and discover unexpected talents within yourself, a magical shift takes place. You're no longer a satellite orbiting someone else's planet, but an independent universe with its own laws of attraction. The irony is, it's precisely when you truly stop needing his attention that it unexpectedly appears, because the male psyche is wired in such a way that the feeling of being indispensable is the air his ego breathes. By shattering that illusion, by showing that your world can exist perfectly well without his participation, you strike at the most vulnerable part of his self-perception. Jung called this an identity crisis. His image of himself as being necessary and significant begins to crumble like a house of cards. But the true value of this realization isn't about making him come back. It's in your inner liberation. When you stop clinging to a relationship that's draining you, space opens up in your life for new, higher quality connections. You're no longer a woman in desperate need, but a woman who consciously chooses. This shift in energy is felt from a distance. You no longer ask, beg, or try to prove your worth. You simply live a full, rich life, and that becomes your most powerful lure. Jung especially emphasized that our self-esteem is often built on the reflections we see in the eyes of others. When you stop being his mirror, constantly reflecting his importance, he's confronted with a frightening reality. Maybe he isn't the person he imagined himself to be. This is a painful but necessary realization that can be the beginning of his true growth. If, of course, he proves capable of such a transformation. The secret is to stop making him exceptional. Let him become one of many in your rich world, not the sole focus of your attention. Find sources of self-respect outside of relationships, in a job that inspires you, in creativity that fills you with meaning, in friendships that support you. Allow yourself to be happy without his participation. Paradoxically, this can become the catalyst for his genuine interest. But by now, it will no longer matter so much to you. When you no longer feed his ego with your attention, he faces a difficult choice, either to actually become better to earn a place in your life, or to remain in the emptiness he created himself. But the most wonderful thing about this transformation isn't even his possible return on new terms. It's that, having gone through this, you'll never be the same. You will not be the one who is ready to sacrifice your dignity for the phantom of love. You discover an amazing truth. True power isn't in controlling others, but in absolute sovereignty over your own life. As Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." By choosing yourself, you're not just changing the dynamic of a single relationship. You're rewriting the entire story of your life, creating a new narrative where you're the main character, not a supporting player in someone else's drama. And when one day you look back at the woman who was so afraid of losing his attention, you won't recognize yourself, because having gone through this experience, you'll gain something much more valuable than someone else's love. You'll find your true self, and this is the greatest victory that can be won in this life. A victory that makes all past suffering not in vain, leaving it as part of your journey to yourself. When you stop chasing his attention, an amazing transformation starts to occur in the dynamic of your relationships. Power imperceptibly flows into your hands, even though you never set out to achieve that goal. You just realize, at some point, that you no longer want to participate in this exhausting game where you're constantly proving your worth, and he takes it for granted. Carl Jung explained that the human psyche works in a paradoxical way. We value most what we can lose, and barely notice what we consider to be our inherent possession. When you stop being a guaranteed part of his life, his confidence starts to crack. That very indifference that used to make you suffer now turns against him. A man who's used to your constant availability suddenly faces an unfamiliar situation. Your attention no longer flows to him like a river. He can convince himself as much as he wants that it's even better this way, but his subconscious starts sounding the alarm. He called it the predictability crisis. When the usual pattern crumbles, the psyche falls into a state of imbalance. The interesting thing is, you're not doing anything specific for this. You're simply starting to live your life, filling your days with interesting events, developing, socializing with friends, and pursuing long-postponed plans. And this absence of your usual attention affects him more strongly than any words or scenes. He suddenly realizes that he can no longer predict your reactions and doesn't understand what's on your mind. You become a mystery that his psyche is desperately trying to solve. Jung particularly emphasized that the male psyche is especially vulnerable to what cannot be controlled or systematized. When you stop being an open book, his confidence gradually gives way to anxiety. He starts to notice your social networks, accidentally bring you up in conversations with mutual friends, and look for reasons to contact you. This is an unconscious strategy. His unconscious is trying to restore the disrupted balance. But the most amazing thing happens when you understand that you no longer need to force him to realize anything. Your calm, confident absence speaks louder than any reproaches or explanations. As Jung wrote, sometimes the most powerful message is the one that was not sent. You no longer reflect his significance. You become a mirror in which he unexpectedly sees his true face. What is it that he's really losing when you leave? Not just a convenient woman who was always at hand. He's losing a part of himself, the version of his personality that existed only because of your admiration and attention. Jung called this a loss of reflection. His ego no longer sees himself in your eyes as significant, special, and irreplaceable. And here's the main paradox. The less you try to win back his attention, the more likely he is to start giving it to you. But by that point, you'll most likely have discovered an amazing thing. You deserve much more than a relationship built on games of ignoring and uncertainty. You discover a simple but revolutionary truth. True strength is not in making him come back, but in deciding for yourself if he's worthy of a place in your new, meaningful life. And this decision, made from a state of inner integrity, and not from resentment or fear of loneliness, becomes your most significant victory. As Jung said, that to which you resist persists, that which you accept transforms. Accept the fact that some people come into our lives only to teach us important lessons of self-love. And when these lessons are learned, their mission is complete. But what remains with you, your new, healthy self-respect, your integrity and independence, is far more valuable than any toxic relationship. You're no longer the woman who lives waiting for someone else's attention. You become the author of your own story, a woman who knows her worth and doesn't settle for less than she deserves. And this transformation is the greatest reward for all the trials you've been through. You can't even imagine how powerful a turnaround takes place in his consciousness when he suddenly realizes that he might actually lose you. Carl Jung explained that the human psyche is structured in this way. We constantly test the boundaries of others to understand how far we can go without consequences. Men do this in relationships often unconsciously. They distance themselves, ignore, demonstrate indifference, because at some level they are sure that whatever they do, you will always be there. But what happens when that confidence disappears? When you stop giving him free validation, when he no longer feels that reliable support that could be relied on at any moment? His ego enters a state of crisis. He's used to perceiving your attention as something that goes without saying, like air that's always there and doesn't need to be thought about. And suddenly that air disappears. Jung called this a pattern violation. The human psyche seeks predictability, and when the usual scheme collapses, there is a profound discomfort. A man who thought he was completely in control of the situation suddenly faces a new reality, where the rules of the game have changed. Now it's no longer you trying to earn his attention, but he finds himself in a position where he has to prove something. The difference between a woman who is valued and a woman who is ignored lies in one simple but fundamental understanding. Your attention is a gift, not an obligation. When you stop chasing, begging, and accepting scraps of attention as mercy, you rewrite the rules of interaction. His desire to control is transformed into a need to be accepted. But the most beautiful thing here is that by this point you are no longer waiting for his approval. You have changed, grown, and been reborn. You are no longer the woman he thought he knew. However, the key point is authenticity. You can't just pretend to be indifferent by playing some clever strategies. This should be a real, deep understanding. You should never have begged for someone's attention. Jung said that what we allow others reflects what we allow ourselves. If you continue to invest in a person who is not investing in you, you are sending your subconscious mind the message, "I don't deserve more." And this setting needs to be broken. Imagine what it's like for him to see that you no longer need him to feel amazing, that your energy no longer revolves around him, that your happiness does not depend on his approval, that your self-esteem is no longer determined by his presence or absence. At this moment, his confidence crumbles, his ego cracks, and the question arises in his head for the first time. What if I lost the only woman who was really worth anything? The most powerful moment comes when you don't even try to prove anything specifically. He just starts noticing the changes. Your life is full of meaning. You radiate confidence. You no longer react to his attempts to manipulate the distance. His strategies stop working. And then something completely new is born in his psyche. Fear. Not pretense, not temporary, but deep, penetrating fear. He is afraid to realize that he may have made a fatal mistake. He is afraid to understand that he is no longer the center of your world. He is afraid to face the fact that his image of himself as an irreplaceable person in your life has fallen to dust. And the best thing about this is that you don't need to do anything special. You just live your best life. Jung called this a meeting and the shadow, a moment when a person faces the consequences of their actions and must either change or continue to live with the consciousness of loss. When he, in the silence of his thoughts, begins to ask himself, did I really know her as well as I thought? Did I really have the power that I imagined? This is the point of the real coup. But the most important thing is that by this point you already understand. If he realizes your value only when he risks losing it, it means he has never really seen you. And this realization makes you free. Free to choose, free to move on, free to be with someone who appreciates you not only when you leave, but every day, every minute, simply because you are. As Jung said, we meet ourselves again and again in thousands of external guises. Perhaps his role in your life was exactly this, to help you meet the you who knows her worth and doesn't settle for less than she deserves. And this meeting is the most important of all possible. You're stuck in this excruciating cycle, analyzing every word of his, every gesture, every day without messages, as if your very existence depended on it. You've turned his indifference into an obsession, forgetting to ask yourself, when did you become so insignificant to yourself? Carl Jung called this projection. We cling to external objects when they resolve internal conflicts. His coldness is just a mirror reflecting your own attitude towards yourself. At what point did you decide that his attention was worth your peace of mind? When did you agree that your value is determined by how often he texts or how he looks? You gave him the power to decide whether you're worthy of love, as if your heart is in court and he's the only judge. But here's the cruel truth. If a person doesn't see your value right away, no evidence will help. True love does not require justification. It either is or it is not. Jung explained that we attract people into our lives who reflect our deep-seated beliefs. If you constantly find yourself with men who ignore you, this is not an accident, it is a symptom that somewhere deep down, you yourself allow such treatment. Perhaps as a child you were taught that love must be earned with good behavior, or you learned that your needs are always secondary. Anyway, now you are paying this internal debt. You can only break this vicious circle through painful consciousness. His behavior is not the cause of your suffering, but the consequence of your silent consent. When you stop looking for excuses for his indifference and start asking the right questions, why do I agree to such crumbs of attention? What part of me believes that it doesn't deserve more? Only then will the real transformation begin. Jung said, I am not what happened to me. Ian is who I chose to stay. You are not a victim of his inattention. You are the author of your destiny. And right now, you have a choice. Continue to chase after someone who doesn't value your time, or start behaving like a woman who knows her worth, even if you don't feel it with all your heart yet. Behind his mask of confidence often hides a vulnerability that he will never admit. Men who play aloofness are usually panicky about real intimacy, although they will never admit it. They don't know how to handle emotions, because they were taught that real men don't cry. Subconsciously check your boundaries and respect only those who keep these boundaries. But the point is not in him. The point is that you allow this performance to continue. You agree to be a spectator in your own humiliation instead of leaving the hall and starting to live your life. To stop being a backup option, you need to take a few decisive steps. Take back the right to claim. My time, my energy, my love, this is a privilege, not an obligation. Start disappearing from places where you are not valued. Not with a scandal, not with loud statements. Just stop coming. Invest all this energy that you have spent on him for years in yourself. Courses, sports, therapy, travel. Anything that will make you remember who you really are. Jung warned. As long as you are looking for salvation in me, you are losing yourself. Your strength is not in making him afraid to lose you. It is in the ability to say, I am no longer participating in this game. I do not require attention. I attract it. I don't prove my worth. I radiate it. And if someone doesn't see this, it's their loss, not my tragedy. True victory will come not when he returns, but when even if he returns, you can calmly ask, and why, in fact, should I take you back? This will be the moment when you stop being a pawn in his game and become a queen in your own life, where the rules are dictated by your self-respect, And the main prize is you yourself in all your value and strength. You deserve love that does not require proof, that does not make you guess and suffer, that chooses you every day, not because you beg, but because it is impossible to imagine any other way. And the first step to such love is to start treating yourself exactly like that. Because, as Jung said, we will not be able to change anything in our life until we change something in our thinking. Your thinking deserves much more than endless attempts to earn the love of someone who is not able to give it. When you stop asking for love, it comes itself, as your inner transformation changes everything around. You wake up in the morning and the first thought is to check your phone, no messages. Again, your heart shrinks, the same question spinning in your head. Why doesn't he write? What did I do wrong? How do I get him to notice me? Familiar? You are not alone. Millions of women around the world spend their precious energy daily on these agonizing reflections. But what if I tell you that there is another way? A way where you no longer depend on someone's attention, where your value is not determined by the number of messages on your phone, where you finally find that inner freedom you dream of. True love is like breathing. You don't think about how to breathe. You don't count how many times it happened during the day. It just is. If you have to constantly remind yourself, beg for attention, adjust, obey the rules. This is not love. This is addiction. And the first addiction that needs to be broken is the addiction to the very idea that someone should make you happy. Imagine a tree. It doesn't ask the sun to shine brighter, doesn't beg the rain to water it more often. It just grows, reaches for the light, puts its roots deeper into the ground, and nature gives it everything it needs. So do you. When you stop chasing attention and start just living fully, brightly, consciously, the world in an amazing way starts to give you exactly what you deserve. But how to go from theory to practice? How to stop being the one who constantly checks the phone and become the one whose presence they want to feel nearby? Start small. Today, don't write first. Tomorrow, cancel the meeting that he reluctantly agreed to. The day after tomorrow, sign up for the masterclass that you have been putting off for a long time. Step by step, you build a new self, for whom your own life is more interesting than waiting for someone else's message. You will be surprised, but when you really shift the focus to yourself, something amazing happens. He starts to feel this change. First, slight bewilderment, then anxiety, then the desire to return the attention that he used to receive just like that. But here's the paradox. By that point, you are already so passionate about your new life that his attempts to return everything as it was no longer have the same power over you, because you have understood the main thing. Your value is not in how others treat you. It is in how you treat yourself, in how much space you give to your dreams, in how boldly you say no to what does not make you happy, in how you stop putting up with crumbs of attention, knowing that you deserve a whole feast. And when you really live this realization, you no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to build strategies on how to make him afraid to lose you. You just live, and your life is so bright that he either adapts to your rhythm or stays far behind. And in both cases, you win. Now take a deep breath, exhale, and ask yourself one question. If I really loved myself, how would I behave right now? Start with this. The rest will come to him, because the world always reflects what we carry inside. And when there is a whole universe inside, and not emptiness craving for someone else's attention, everything around begins to change. You deserve love that does not make you guess, that does not require decoding messages, that chooses you every day, not because you achieve this, but because you cannot imagine any other choice. And the first step to such love is to start treating yourself exactly like that, as the only person who is guaranteed to stay with you for life, as the most important love of your life. The rest will just follow this realization.